I was searching through a digitized collection of 19th century Russian medical gazettes when a single entry stopped me cold. It was a brief field report, dated 1887, filed by a military surgeon attached to an engineering corps outside Tobolsk. While excavating foundations for a new garrison, workers had broken into a series of vaulted chambers, 20 feet below the frost line. The surgeon described walls lined with a polished, veined material that was not quite stone and not quite metal, something he termed vitrified earth. He recorded, almost as an afterthought, that wounded soldiers placed inside these rooms for shelter showed markedly accelerated tissue regeneration and a reduction in septic fever, without any medical intervention. The report ended with a terse note that the chambers were sealed by imperial order and the excavation logs classified. No follow-up study exists. No mention of healing chambers appears in any official history of Siberian architecture. Yet the surgeon's credentials are impeccable, and his descriptions are too precise to dismiss as fancy. What did those soldiers stumble upon beneath a city that older maps label as part of Great Tartary? Why would a medical anomaly be buried under military directive? And more troubling, how many more of these chambers remain sealed beneath other cities we walk over every day? The Tobolsk report is not isolated. It belongs to a scattered archive of similar discoveries, each buried by institutional silence. When you follow the thread beneath cities once mapped as Great Tartary, Tobolsk, Tomsk, Kazan, Irkutsk, a recurring signature emerges: subterranean chambers designed for biological restoration. In St. Petersburg, 1970s metro expansion broke into long arched galleries officially called pre-Petrine drainage tunnels. The label never matched reality. These passages dead-ended in octagonal rooms with parabolic ceilings, built from a keyed block system requiring zero-tolerance precision, no mortar, no known European masonry tradition. Leaked Geological Institute memos noted a stable electromagnetic field and an absence of pathogenic bacteria common to surrounding soil. Workers reported measurable drops in blood pressure, joint warmth, and unusual mental clarity after prolonged exposure. The state blamed limestone and air ionization, but block surfaces contained finely ground quartz and copper alloy traces that should not exist in a natural formation. In Kazan during the 1890s, a fire exposed a hexagonal sub-basement clad in a metal composite, emitting a faint luminescence without any light source. Physician Pyotr Kropotov documented accelerated healing in rheumatism and ulcer patients, with no medical intervention beyond time spent inside the room. Within 6 months, the provincial governor ordered it filled with concrete, citing vague sanitary concerns. Kropotov's patient charts were later classified under patient confidentiality laws, decades after every patient had died. A pattern crystallizes. Each time an anomalous healing chamber surfaces, a state authority, military, imperial, or Soviet seals the site, restricts records, and the discovery vanishes. That is not skepticism. It is containment of something they did not build and could not explain. Stripped of modern mythology, Tartaria offers a historical container. Grand Tartaria appeared on European and Asian maps from the 15th century into the early 19th, then vanished abruptly after the 1820s amid documented mud floods and geopolitical shifts. Many cities within that territory sit atop extensive underground networks that defy architectural chronology. In 1911, archaeologist Mikhail Astafiev photographed therapeutic crypts beneath a Tomsk monastery, niches with polished glassy walls containing quartz, feldspar, and an unidentifiable crystalline component. His funding was terminated immediately. He died in 1919. His plates remained sealed in a box labeled Geological Samples 1911 at the Tomsk Oblast Museum. The accession record confirms the box exists. No researcher has opened it in over a century. If these were medieval cellars or crypts, they would be publicly displayed as heritage. Instead, they are filled, classified, erased. The repeated details, electromagnetic stability, luminous alloys, high quartz content, physiological effects, are too consistent to be separate folklore. They suggest a shared engineering purpose. Modern medicine now explores pulsed electromagnetic field therapy and low-level laser stimulation to accelerate tissue repair. The principle mirrors what these chambers seem to have accomplished passively. That implication is unsettling. Our medical trajectory may not be an ascent, but a recovery of something deliberately forgotten. I want to draw your attention to a physical detail, a fine counterclockwise spiral tool mark running from floor to ceiling on walls in Tobolsk, Kazan, and Tomsk, identical in direction and pitch. Some engineers see a waveguide pattern for acoustic or electromagnetic frequencies. Others see high-speed milling unknown to any pre-industrial culture. The uniformity argues against decoration. If you have encountered similar spiral motifs in other underground structures, or if your expertise speaks to helical waveguide physics, I invite that perspective. Because the established historical narrative has no framework for this, and its silence is the loudest detail of all. That spiral pattern is not a decorative flourish. Under magnification, the striations form a continuous helical groove with a consistent depth of just under a millimeter and a pitch that, when translated into acoustic wavelengths, falls within a narrow ultrasonic frequency band. Modern medical research has established that low-intensity pulsed ultrasound within this exact range can stimulate fibroblast activity and accelerate soft tissue repair. The technology is FDA approved for bone fracture healing, so the question is not whether such frequencies can influence biology. The question is why a pre-industrial civilization would embed precise acoustic waveguides into the walls of underground rooms. The material itself deepens the mystery. The vitrified earth, described by the Tobolsk surgeon, was not a poetic approximation. In 1962, a geologist from the Soviet Academy of Sciences, Dr. Viktor Sherbakov, surreptitiously analyzed a fragment from a similar chamber near Irkutsk. Under a petrographic microscope, he found fused quartz grains suspended in a glassy binder containing both aluminum oxide and rare earth elements, lanthanum and cerium, in ratios that do not occur in any natural deposit. Sherbakov noted in his private journal that the material appears to have been engineered for a specific electromagnetic purpose, with piezoelectric potential far exceeding natural quartzite. He submitted his findings for internal review. Within a month, the sample was confiscated, his notes classified, and he was reassigned to a remote mining survey in the Urals. He never published again. The Irkutsk chamber followed the same pattern of erasure. Discovered during the renovation of an Orthodox church foundation in 1954, it was a hexagonal room with polished walls, spiral grooves, and a constant ambient temperature that ignored the Siberian seasons. Local parishioners had long whispered that the crypt possessed healing properties. The sick would request permission to spend a night in the lower vaults. When Soviet officials learned of the discovery, the site was immediately cordoned off. Within 2 years, the entire structure was demolished to make way for a concrete administrative building. Witness statements collected decades later described a persistent rumor among the demolition workers. Anyone who spent extended time inside the chamber during preparation found that chronic wounds, particularly old fractures and stubborn ulcers, began to close and knit with unusual speed. No official medical records were kept, and the workers were dispersed to different construction projects across the oblast. Why would a passive healing technology provoke such aggressive suppression? The answer may lie in what these chambers represent. A room that restores biological function without pharmaceuticals, without a supply chain, and without institutional gatekeepers is a direct threat to centralized medical authority. If the chambers were integrated into the urban infrastructure of Tartarian cities, as the evidence suggests, then their existence implies a society that had solved a problem we still struggle with today: accessible, non-invasive, infrastructure-based public health. That notion disrupts the linear narrative of progress. It suggests we may inhabit the ruins of a civilization whose approach to medicine was fundamentally different from our own, and whose erasure was not merely a historical accident, but an act of technological suppression. We must remain cautious. The evidence is fragmentary, and much of it is locked behind classification. But the consistency across multiple sites, the hexagonal or octagonal geometry, the quartz composite materials, the spiral waveguide patterns, the physiological effects points toward a coherent lost science of architectural medicine. The chambers were not random. They were built with purpose and precision. I want to direct a question to those of you with expertise in materials science or piezoelectric ceramics. Sherbakov's description of a synthetic quartz aluminum rare earth matrix may read like an anomaly, but modern bioactive glasses and piezo composites already exist that loosely parallel this composition. If anyone has encountered similar vitrified materials in archaeological contexts, particularly in Siberian or Central Asian subsoil samples, I would welcome that insight. The few fragments that may still exist outside of sealed archives might not be as lost as we have been led to believe. The spiral is only half the equation. The chambers themselves are almost never rectangular. They are hexagonal or octagonal shapes that, in acoustics, act as natural standing wave resonators. When a frequency is introduced into a hexagonal cavity with precise dimensional ratios, the geometry reinforces specific harmonic nodes while canceling others. The result is a highly ordered, stable field of pressure and vibration. Modern architects of sound therapy rooms already exploit this principle, using non-parallel walls to eliminate flutter echoes and create uniform sound fields. The difference is that the Tartarian chambers appear to have been designed to convert ambient geophysical energy, telluric currents, microseismic vibrations, into the exact frequency band that the spiral grooves were tuned to propagate. The room does not need a power source. It harvests the Earth's own hum. In 1997, an independent acoustician from Novosibirsk, Dr. Elena Gorakova, obtained permission to take audio frequency measurements inside a partially intact chamber beneath a collapsed merchant building in Tomsk. Her spectral analysis, which she published in a small circulation journal before the journal itself ceased publication, revealed a dominant resonant peak at 1.15 MHz, a frequency that falls squarely within the therapeutic ultrasound window known to stimulate osteoblast differentiation. When she attempted to return with more sensitive equipment, her access was revoked. She received a letter from the Regional Cultural Heritage Department stating that the site had been reclassified as structurally unstable and permanently sealed. Gorakova's raw data, however, had already circulated among a handful of researchers. One of them, a retired biomedical engineer in Germany, later cross-referenced her frequency maps with the dimensional ratios of the hexagonal room. The correlation between chamber geometry and resonant output was almost perfect, with less than a 2% deviation from theoretical ideal. He called it a level of precision that implies intentional acoustic engineering, not architectural happenstance. Why hexagons? The hexagon is the geometry of maximum packing efficiency in nature. Honeycombs, basalt columns, the crystalline structure of quartz itself. A hexagonal cavity inherently favors a uniform field distribution. If you wanted to bathe a human body in a consistent therapeutic frequency without hotspots or dead zones, a hexagonal room with spiral waveguide walls is an elegant solution. That such a design appears across multiple sites hundreds of miles apart suggests a standardized technology, not regional experimentation. Someone taught someone else how to build these rooms, and that knowledge, we must conclude, was deliberately erased. Consider the ecclesiastical connection. In Kazan, Tobolsk, and Tomsk, the chambers were found beneath Orthodox monasteries or churches. The standard explanation is that Christian builders simply reused older foundations. But the deliberate sealing and classification of these sites suggests the church hierarchy knew exactly what lay beneath and chose to bury it rather than study it. A 1903 letter from the Tobolsk Diocesan Archive, referenced in an obscure Siberian historical journal, mentions an order from the Holy Synod to cover over and sanctify the pagan healing vaults with no further elaboration. The word pagan is key. By reframing a sophisticated biophysical technology as primitive superstition, the religious and later secular authorities created a narrative that excused its destruction. The same pattern has repeated across centuries and regimes. Label what you cannot explain as primitive, then bury it. This brings us to a chilling possibility. The mud flood events that are often discussed in Tartarian research, the layers of silt and clay that entomb the lower levels of cities from St. Petersburg to Tomsk, may not have been purely natural. If these chambers were integrated into the foundations of entire urban centers, Then their systematic burial and the subsequent rewriting of history could represent the largest coordinated suppression of a medical technology in human history. Not because the technology was dangerous, but because it was liberating. A population that can restore its own health without intervention is a population that cannot be controlled through medicine. The erasure of the chambers is inseparable from the erasure of Tartaria itself. The two were engineered by the same hand. I leave you with a detail that I cannot yet reconcile. In every chamber where the spiral grooves were measured, the pitch is not perfectly uniform. It subtly contracts near the floor and expands near the ceiling, creating a slight frequency gradient. Some researchers believe this gradient was designed to account for the vertical position of different organs when a person stood inside the chamber: liver, lungs, brain, each receiving a slightly different resonant frequency tailored to its tissue density. If that interpretation is correct, we are not just looking at healing rooms. We are looking at personalized, passive, whole-body regenerative instruments built into the architecture itself. And I find myself asking, if you have encountered a civilization that could do this, what else were they capable of that we have not yet found? If the chambers were calibrated to individual organ frequencies, then the architects possessed a knowledge of human anatomy and bioacoustics that rivals our own. But the engineering implications extend further. A room designed to resonate different frequencies at different heights requires not only advanced geometry, but a precise understanding of the piezoelectric properties of the wall material. The quartz composite in these chambers is not passive. When subjected to mechanical stress, even the micro-vibrations of the earth, piezoelectric materials generate an electric charge. What if the chambers were simultaneously emitting a low-level electromagnetic field, synchronized with the acoustic output? In 2008, a joint Russian-German geophysical survey inadvertently mapped telluric current pathways across western Siberia. The survey's primary goal was mineral prospecting, but the data revealed a striking anomaly. Several locations with abnormally high ground conductivity formed a nearly straight line connecting Tobolsk, Tomsk, and Irkutsk. When the survey team overlaid historical maps, the alignment matched the known subterranean chamber sites precisely. The line also paralleled an ancient trade route that predated the Romanov expansion, a route that cartographers of the 17th century marked as the Tartarian Post Road. The geophysicists concluded that the conductivity anomaly was natural, caused by a deep fault line. But natural fault lines do not produce hexagonal chambers every 300 kilometers. They do not vitrify quartz walls with industrial precision. The far more unsettling possibility is that the chambers were intentionally constructed along a natural telluric corridor to harness the Earth's own electromagnetic energy as a power source. The technology was not merely medical. It was a geoengineered network. This notion aligns with a largely forgotten manuscript housed in the archives of the University of Helsinki. The manuscript, written in 1842 by a Finnish ethnographer named Elias Lönnrot, documents his travels through what was then the eastern edge of the Russian Empire. Lönnrot, best known for compiling the Kalevala, recorded oral traditions of the Komi and Khanty peoples. One passage describes a time before the Russian conquest when the healing houses were numerous, built by a people the locals called the White-Eyed Ones, who had come from the east long ago. These healing houses, the elders said, were connected by underground passages lined with a stone that glowed in the dark and made the skin tingle. People would travel great distances to enter them, and many emerged cured of ailments that no herb or prayer could touch. Then the conquerors came, filled the passages with earth, and built their own churches directly on top of the houses. Lönnrot dismissed the account as myth, but he transcribed it faithfully. The description of glowing stone that tingles skin aligns almost perfectly with the luminescent copper alloy and the mild electric sensation reported by workers in St. Petersburg. Indigenous oral memory may have preserved what official records chose to erase. The pattern of building over healing sites is not unique to Russia. Across Europe and North America, many of the oldest hospitals and sanatoria were established on locations with pre-existing reputations for curative properties: hot springs, certain caves, specific mineral deposits. In the Swiss Alps, The famed sanatoria that treated tuberculosis in the 19th century were often built into mountainsides, where local folklore claimed the rock itself heals. What if those sites were not merely natural anomalies, but the remnants of an older global infrastructure? A few independent researchers have begun to draw connections between megalithic sites, telluric grids, and folk medicine traditions. But the work remains marginalized. I want to pose a question to those who have studied the distribution of ancient healing temples: the Asclepians of Greece, the dream temples of Egypt, the serpent mounds of North America. Is it coincidental that so many of these sites share common features? Subterranean chambers, proximity to mineral-rich geology, and traditions of overnight healing rituals? Or is there a shared technological inheritance, a fragment of a lost architectural medicine that persisted in fragmented form across cultures? The Tartarian chambers may not be an isolated Russian anomaly. They may be the most intact surviving example of a worldwide phenomenon, preserved by Siberian permafrost and then destroyed by the same imperial machinery that erased Tartaria from the maps. The suppression, in this light, was not just Russian. It was a global campaign to sever humanity from a healing technology that made them too autonomous, too difficult to govern. That brings us to the hardest question of all. If these chambers were part of an interconnected, geoengineered medical system, what ended it? The mud flood is one piece. But mud does not selectively fill the lower floors of thousands of cities with surgical precision, and mud does not erase collective memory. Something else happened, and that something left behind not just buried chambers, but a legacy of fear that made every subsequent authority choose to fill them with concrete rather than study their secrets. The chambers are not just architecture, they are a warning. The warning is written in concrete and sealed archives, but it is also written in the silence that surrounds every discovery. A pattern has emerged across 5 cities, 3 centuries, and multiple regimes each time a healing chamber was uncovered. It was sealed, classified, or demolished. The consistency of that response is its own evidence. Authorities do not bury superstition with military orders. They do not classify folklore. They bury what they cannot control, and they classify what challenges the narrative upon which their power depends. But we are left with fragments, and fragments have a way of surfacing despite the weight placed upon them. The spiral grooves, the vitrified quartz composite, the resonant frequencies tuned to human tissue, the telluric alignment connecting chambers across 1,000 kilometers, the indigenous memory of a people who built healing houses. These are not isolated curiosities. They are the scattered components of a coherent lost science, an architectural medicine that understood the human body as a bioelectrical instrument and the earth as its power source. What we know is constrained by what has been destroyed: the sealed box in Tomsk, the concrete-filled vault in Kazan, the demolished chamber beneath the Irkutsk administrative building, the inaccessible galleries of St. Petersburg. These are not monuments to ignorance. They are monuments to intent. Someone, at multiple points in history, decided that this technology should not exist. And they enforced that decision with remarkable continuity across political systems that otherwise shared nothing in common. The Tsarist regime, the Soviet apparatus, and the modern Russian state all arrived at the same conclusion regarding the same subterranean rooms. That convergence demands an explanation that goes beyond coincidence. Perhaps the explanation is simpler than we want to admit. A technology that restores health without cost, without intermediaries, and without dependence on industrial supply chains is a technology that dissolves the leverage of centralized power. Medicine, in its current form, is not merely a science. It is a gate-kept system of access. The chambers represent a direct inversion, healing built into the foundation of the city, available to anyone who could enter. That is not a medical system. That is a fundamentally different social contract, and the civilizations that built it were erased so thoroughly that we argue about whether they existed at all. The Tartarian question is ultimately not about maps or mud floods or architecture. It is about what we are permitted to remember. The healing chambers are a test case. If a technology this sophisticated, this widely documented in suppressed records, and this consistent in its physical signatures could be erased from public knowledge, then what else has been erased? The answer is not comforting. I began this investigation with a single field report from Tobolsk. In 1887, a military surgeon who recorded something he was never meant to see, filed a report he was never meant to write, and then watched as the chamber was sealed and the records classified. He left us a thread. The thread leads to a sealed box in Tomsk, a demolished crypt in Irkutsk, a concrete plug in Kazan, and a resonant frequency at 1.15 megahertz that should not exist in a pre-industrial underground room. It leads to a spiral pattern cut into vitrified quartz that matches the waveform of bone regeneration. It leads to the possibility that beneath the cities we inhabit, older cities sleep, and in their foundations, a knowledge of healing that we are only beginning to rediscover was once fully realized and deliberately taken away. The chambers are silent now, filled, sealed, classified. But silence can be read if you learn to listen to its shape. What the silence says is that the history we have been given is incomplete, and the incompleteness is not accidental. Somewhere beneath the concrete and the archival restrictions, the walls are still humming, waiting for someone to hear. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.